Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's Professional Series webcast. I am Dave Isbell, the Assistant Director of Alumni Professional Enrichment at the Michigan State University Alumni Association. And I'm glad to have all of you here today. Today I'd like to introduce you to Kelly S. Holdcraft, who is the current Director of Alumni Engagement for the William and Mary Alumni Association, where she's responsible for connecting 89,000 William and Mary alumni to the college and to each other on personal, professional, and intellectual levels through college traditions and campus partnerships. Before joining William and Mary, Kelly spent 20 years in the DC legal community, most recently as the director of and an adjunct professor in the Paralegal Studies program at Georgetown University. At Georgetown University's Center for Continuing and Professional Education, Kelly taught career service courses and was responsible for leading the only program on campus with federal guaranteed employment reporting program requirements. She received her BA in Political Science from MSU, Master's in Strategic Communication from Georgetown, and is beginning the journey towards her doctorate in Higher Ed Administration at the College of William and Mary. Kelly is also the current chair of the Alumni Enrichment Committee for the MSU Alumni Association Board. We love Kelly, and we're so excited to have her here today. So with that, I would like to pull your attention to the left side of your screen. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them as we go. Kelly will get to them either in the middle of the presentation or she may save them to the end. So watch for that. Also, you need to know that this is being recorded, so if you'd like a copy, you can email Brenda at haynesb@msu.edu, and that is already spelled out in the left hand of the questions. With that, I will give it over to you, Kelly. Thank you for being here with us, Kelly.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and the love goes both ways. I'm very blessed in that I get to have a volunteer relationship with Dave and Lisa and Christopher Smith, and I hope that each and every one of you has an opportunity to do more and to work more with MSU's Alumni Association and their Alumni Enrichment team, because they are some fabulous folks. But then again, aren't we all us Spartans, right? Haha. So I wanted to first do a little housekeeping and just say that, like Dave talked about, ask lots of questions. There'll be a couple little interactive parts here where I'll ask for some opinions or some ideas or some different things, but feel free to ask as many questions as possible. I do find that in doing webinars, because I have done quite a few, that it works better to answer the questions at the end. And the best thing about that is, even if we run out of time, I am committed to making sure that any questions that you ask, that I work hard to answer them for you and make myself available to any and all of you for additional questions for follow-up. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about stories today. So I'm going to start this presentation about stories out by giving you guys a story about myself. So when I left Michigan State, I moved to Philadelphia, and I got a paralegal certificate there, and was lucky enough at the ripe old age of 22 to find a job with the largest law firm in Washington, D.C., where I spent the next 4 years essentially toiling away with this law firm. And for those of you who have worked in the legal profession, all those war stories are true. I worked 100-hour months, and really was a loyal member of that team. And what that ended up doing is, for basically until I was in my late 30s, I never had to have a resume. I was a very lucky person in that any job that I had after my time at Hogan and Hartson, which was the law firm, I got it from the work that I did at Hogan, whether it was a client or an attorney that knew me. It wasn't until, unfortunately, in 2009 when I came back and worked for the law firm, again, not needing a resume. I came back from staying home with my kids for a little while, and they hired me right back up. I got caught up in a huge mass strategic and stealth layoff. So there I was at the age of 35 with no job. Excuse me, it was 2009. So I was 39, even worse. No job and no resume. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I really had to take a long, hard look at my career path and thinking about the story that I wanted to tell. Through that, I was able to secure a job at Georgetown. And actually, when I was at Georgetown, was thrust into career services, which was great because I had just had a successful job search, but in this elevated level of an Ivy League school where I was this tiny little certificate program on campus that the federal government required that I gave them guaranteed employment numbers. So not only did I have to help my students find jobs, but then I also started teaching career services, and then through career services with my own program, I started teaching career services to the wider group. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to explore some of the tips and techniques that not only that I use successfully in my own job search, but also then I honed them and instructed them. I guided and mentored others to use them in helping them find employment. And so we're going to primarily focus on resume, but really once we work on creating your story and your brand, the specific details you have in your what I call your career bag of tricks can be used in many different ways, whether it's in personal or professional ways, on a resume, in a cover letter, in an interview, or even in social media and branding yourself, and then also in professional and personal networking interactions. So this list here is just some of the things that we're going to focus on in our time together. We're going to talk about our story. We're going to talk about how our brand works into that. Summary and accomplishments, again, are very specific to resumes. But again, the more we talk about this, you'll see that everything that we talk about today can be used in other parts of your personal and professional career. And then I'll really blow your mind with talking about how many stories we actually need to tell about ourselves. So let's move on and talk about this. So here's the story that we're thinking about and that we need to create for a job search. But what is this story? Is it this fascinating autobiography, first step to forever my story, 100% official Justin Bieber, or is it a business plan for your prospective employer? So while we're kind of pondering that question, why don't we see what Sparty says? So Sparty says it's for you. So Sparty says it's for you because you do need to create this story to begin your journey, to begin down your career path. So if it's done right and it's done well, it really can be a boost for you because, who doesn't like to read a very nice story about themselves? Most often you quote unquote read those stories on people's resumes, maybe also on LinkedIn, but also it's for you because it can be a blueprint, because sometimes when you're researching and writing this story, you can start gaining some insights. You can have what communications and business professionals call that aha moment, where you realize that the stars are lining up and your past experiences and skills are really leading you towards something important, like maybe a new career path, which is actually what happened with me in looking at my past experiences in working for legal professions and then transitioning to training. That's what really led me into thinking that higher education was the place that I would like to move into. So it's also important because it gives you an opportunity to be honest to other people about who you are. To give yourself those pats on the back that you deserve and maybe you're not receiving from your current or your past employers. But also, and we'll be talking a lot about this, whether it's done well or not, it really is your brand of how you want others to think about you. And that's a key point there about how you want others to think about you. Not what others think about you, but how you want others to think about you. But really, sorry to say, Sparty, don't be angry with me. You know how much I love you. It's really a story about them. And this is where people make a lot of mistakes in starting down a career path. Because this really is the difference. If you focus your story, your career path on making a bottom line document that is how you get noticed. That is how you get to the top of the pile. And even though, like me, you may not need it, it's so important to start thinking about it that way. So how do we create this story that makes you look like this adorable little warm-nosed puppy? Oh, isn't it cute? In the pile of gorgeous little cute stuffed animals, how do we say, pick me, I'm the one that's, going to give you years and years of loyalty and love. And really, it's about benefits. You are creating a business document. This story is a business story, it's a business plan, and it's all about the bottom line. And the bottom line is a story that is filled with benefits, not features, benefits. Benefits are accomplishments. Benefits are results. Benefits are bottom line items that show value. These are the types of things. This is just a kind of a general list of how you communicate your benefits. And what are features? Features are skills and tasks. Your story should not be a boring laundry list of the things you do every day. Kind of like that horrible Twitter feed of that friend you knew in 4th grade that you're just not sure why you're following her, but you know every single thing that this person does every day. Oh, today I went to the dentist. Today I went to the laundry. I copied, I filed, I did this. It's not your job description. So, but no matter how you tell this bottom line story, it's about not only telling it, but showing it. And showing that you will have a positive impact on the bottom line of your potential employers. So this show and tell is something that you do with your resume, with your cover letter, with your interview, again, on a personal side, with your social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. So as we're talking about this, I hope that you're having this question like that. That's really great, but how do I start this? Where do I begin? And where I like to begin is with the basics. I like to begin with the basics of making sure that you know what your brand is so you can tell that compelling business story. So you can look at these pictures. They're each very important brands. We can pick one out. Let's pick out H&M. Okay. So here's my question to you. If you saw the H&M symbol or the brand, why don't you go ahead and type into the question section, what's like the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of H&M? Cheap clothes. I don't know who they are. Good. Young and hip, discount. Yeah. So, this is not happenstance. This is, more often than not, it's a very aggressive plan by H&M because they want people, they have millions of, thousands of people and millions and if not billions of dollars that are shaping your thoughts and feelings about their products and services. So this is why, having a brand is important, but I get it. We all don't have the resources of H&M or eBay or McDonald's or IKEA to spend on our own personal brands. But you are a business of one, okay? And you need to spend time actively determining your own brand, especially before others do it for you. So I want to give you an example of this and how I used to illustrate this in my class. And I want you all to know that my class was not a college class. It was a non-traditional student class. So these were all adults who had already graduated from college, people like you and me who were going back for their education. And I did an exercise in class where I would give everybody a 3x5 card, and they would write their name on the front of the card. Then they would slide that card to the person next to them. And these were people in their class who they'd been in class with for a couple months. The person next to them would look at their name, and you would tell them, do it without even thinking. Flip the card over, write down the word that you think about that person. Flip the card back, pass it on to the next person. And by the end of this exercise, when you would get that card back, I would tell the folks when they got their card back, don't flip it over, but I want you to write down 3 words that you feel express what your brand is. You know, I'm sweet, I'm kind, I'm generous. Now flip that card over and I want you to see what other people think your brand is. And it was often very illuminating. Now, of course, I made sure that it was professional at the same time. No, you stink or you smell or you're dumb, that kind of stuff. But, I still have those cards because I would do the exercise with them. I wanted to know what they had branded me to. And it helped me as a professional craft my brand and my teaching style too. So here are the different, what I call extensions of a personal brand. I mean, these are things that branding is something that we've talked a lot about, but there's a billion-dollar industry out there in self-help books, so it's always good to hear these messages over and over and over again. So your personal brand extensions are your performance. How do you deliver your product? Are you a quality product? Are you on time? Are you within budget? Do you give more than is expected? How about your image? I have 2 young boys. I talk to them about this often. What does your dress and clothing say about you? What does your personal hygiene? What is your online image? If I went to your social media right now, is it filled with pictures of you with red Solo cups and doing keg stands, or is it pictures of your family? Those type of things. What is your social media online image? What is your personality? What do you like to work with? What's your style? Is there something else that you bring to the table? So here's my homage to those of us out there who may be a little further down the career path about your personal brand. So before I do anything, who's going to be the first person to tell me what movie this is? Go ahead and type it into questions. Oh, multiple attendees are, thank you. Thank you all out there. Just, mwah, love you. Love this movie. This is from Say Anything, but Lloyd Dobler's character, this is just like a classic line. What do you want to be remembered for? And Lloyd says, I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything. I don't want to sell anything, bought or processed, or bought anything, sold or process anything, sold, bought, or processed, or repair anything, sold, bought, or processed. As a career, I don't want to do that. So, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to have linger with others? What do you want your story to say? Do you know? Have you written it down? I would suspect to say that most of us know what we would like our brand to be, but I would also say most of us have not written that down. And for those of you who haven't, I'm going to show you a way to start. Okay, so here is kind of our first tip and technique, and it's going to look a little daunting, but I want you guys to stick with me because it really is a great exercise to do. Okay, so let's start with creating a statement about you. First thing we do is we think about 3, I call them identifiers. They can be nouns, they can be adjectives, they can be phrases, they can be verbs. They are 3 things about you that you feel or want to communicate about your brand. Okay, so it's kind of the starting point. Then for each of those identifiers, so let's use number 1, we think about what I call qualifiers, kind of like the who, what, where, when. If your identifier is experienced, you want people to think of you as an experienced person. Where is that expressed the most? Is it expressed at work? Is it expressed in a hobby? Is it expressed in your family? If it's at work, is it within a certain specific area? Okay, so now we've taken 1, experienced, and let's say we bring it down to 1.1, where it's I'm experienced at work. Okay, so let's move that down one more level, and we think about 3 specific strengths, specifics for that qualifier. So I'm experienced at work. So tell me 3 things about that specifically express that. So I've worked 20 years in the legal field. I've, I'm somebody who does training for my job. Okay, you'd think that I'd have these just off the top of my head, right? Because they're about myself. I am experienced in that I mentor other people. And what you're actually creating is what I call a bag of tricks. So we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 27 different specific things that express your brand. And you do this for each and every identifier. I'll show you what it kind of looks like on a what we just walked through. We did number 1, 1.1, and 1.1.1. So, who out there would like to try this as a test? And if you would like to be the person, just go ahead and type your first identifier, and I'll call out your name. Don't be shy. You know, when I used to do this in class, it was so much easier because I would just look at the person who was looking away and I would point to them. So somebody give me an identifier about themselves. A noun, an adjective, or a verb. Passion. Love it. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. So, Michelle, you want other people to know that you are a very passionate person. So when you think about this passion that you have for yourself, where do you express it? Give me one place where you express that passion. Go ahead and type it into the questions part, Michelle. Is it at home? Is it, maybe I need to slide this down a little bit. Is it in your work? Is it for Michigan State? Because I know that's where one of my passions is. Okay, let's just say Michelle said that she was very passionate at work. Okay, there you go. Hey, let's use clothing. I like that. Let's try that. You're passionate through clothing. Give me 3 specifics about that. How are you passionate through clothing? Is it that you are a discount shopper and you always look for a bargain? Are you always up on the latest trends? Give me one specific about that. Color. Ooh, I like that. So you're very, you're very passionate about color, and the way that you're passionate about clothing is you express it through the color and the different types of colors that you wear at work. I like that. So you can see that you're starting to build this very specific thing, because I know everybody has done this. They say to people, and especially like in an interview or on a resume or in a cover letter, I'm such a passionate person. And that's what you want to say about yourself. But when somebody turns around and says to you, so tell me, what are you passionate about? And you're like, I'm passionate about. Don't do that. Do this exercise, and you will have this bag that you can reach your hand in and throw things out and say, you know where I'm passionate? I am very passionate about clothing. Can't you tell? Look at, I'm so passionate. I love the way that my colors, how they match, and I try to express myself in the spring. I try to wear all these really great pastels, and in the autumn I like to match the seasons. So again, you're being very specific about yourself. And again, it's about showing instead of telling. Now, I'm going to have you guys think about taking this to another level, because after you've done this, talking about yourself and how these are the things that you want others to think about, how do we take this to a career level? So let's take that brand up a notch. And I want you to think about the fact that you can write down your brand, the 3 things that you really want to express about yourself. Now I want you to take the job description, whether this is a job description of the job that you want or it's the career path that you want to follow, and I want you to think about how those match up. So when you're reading a job description is a roadmap. I mean, they're telling you what they want. It's pretty simple. And there's going to be key words, I guarantee you, through that job description that they're going to repeat over and over. Key terms, they're called key words. How does that match up with your brand? And that is really how you start to take your brand and adapt it to your career search. And when you find that where those 2 match up and you're able to give specifics about it, bam. That's when you can start using those words and specifics. You can use them in your summary, you can use them in your resume, you can use them in your cover letter and your interview, and just in your general social interaction and professional interaction. Okay. Now that we've talked about this very specific technique and tip, I want to move into something that's kind of focus the lens a little bit tighter on something, on a specific resume technique that I've taught, and I've really found it very helpful for myself. Again, it's kind of taking that storytelling and distilling it down, and I call it reading above the fold, which is a journalism term. And it's that fold of the paper, and it's the part that you see. It's that extra read all about it kind of part. So when I'm talking about above the fold, I want you to think about your resume as that expose, as that big extra read all about it New York Times front page cover story, and how you want where you want people to look at it. Because the unfortunate thing about it, and you've probably heard this a zillion times, but most recruiters are only looking at a resume for about 6 seconds. And in that 6 seconds, they're spending it looking at the following things: your name, your title, your education, and as you can see, this is actually an eye tracking, like a heat mapping, eye tracking chart of where people look on a resume. So beyond that 80%, they look for keywords that match the open position. So I ask you, why don't we put all that information above the fold? And in that, I call that a summary. Now, a summary is not an objective. So I've got 2 things here. The first one is an objective, and when I see those on resumes, they make me angry. I mean, like incensed. Because I'm so excited that these people are dynamic and phenomenal and organized, but really that tells me nothing about them. They could be from clown school as far as I know, because a clown is dynamic and phenomenal, and they have strong interpersonal skills. I have a very limited amount of time, but if I read the next summary, I might take another glance at that resume, because it's very specific. And I'm telling you that if you use that time where you think about your brand and you look at that job description and you start layering them together and pulling out those keywords where that matches up. I'd been talking a lot about experienced. If I'm leading with experienced, I'm telling them that I'm the person for the job, and they don't really have to look much farther. Like, okay, well, gosh, this person has 16 years and they've done all the things we're looking for and asked for in this job. Maybe I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to put this to the top of my pile. All right? So this is the ultimate of value, that like don't tell me, show me. And it's, again, that most kind of distilled version of your story that can incorporate your brand. So how do we create this headline, this above the fold headline? I would start with that word, that branding word or phrase that not only is the one that you said you want to be branded for, but also matches up to the job description. And then start adding levels and layers to it, whether it's job title, level of experience, a key feature. I'm just going to kind of click through these a little quicker because they're really just qualifications. Again, these are just things to start thinking about, how you're crafting them into your brand, writing them all down and seeing where they fit into it. Again, matching it up with that job description. And then it's going to take some time. You really have to focus on it and write it and rewrite it, but really it's that proof of ability to deliver. And it is absolutely the hardest part, but it is so worth it. I'm quite certain that many of you have been in maybe career seminars or sessions where they talk about creating your elevator pitch. I get it. You can sit down and write your elevator pitch, but I'm letting you know that taking the steps through creating your brand and really honing it in on the job description that you want will create a better, a more succinct elevator pitch. It is your headline. And the great thing is you can have a zillion different ones. You can craft them to fit whatever story you want. I like what Lisa said, that the objective did not read as if it was about the candidate. Yeah. It just talked about the fact that, here, let me go back to it here. Doop, 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 doop. I love this. Again, when we talked at the front, we talked about whether the story was for you or for them. That's the difference, I think, in an objective versus a summary. An objective is about you, and a summary is about them. Does that make it? I hope that makes it clear. Awesome. Okay, let's plow through these. And then let's talk about another specific item, again, on a resume, but also can be crafted in different ways for other parts of your story. And so you've filled up your bag of tricks and you've made this business story showing how valuable you are and putting together this headline. So you've created the headline, the kind of intro paragraph, but now let's really kind of get into the guts of the story. Let's really show them. And I call these putting your trophies out on the shelf. And I'm going to let you guys all know that probably a majority of you suffer from this really awful illness, and I call it the symptom of this horrible resume illness is what I've referred to as bullet vomit, where when you look at a resume, you don't even know where your eyes should go because there's so many bullets on this, it looks like you just bleh it on the page. And when you start reading through the bleh, you realize that it's not about benefits. It's more about the day-to-day, I got up, I brushed my teeth, I put my shoes on, I copied, I answered the phone. It is your job description. And I am here to tell you that you should only bullet the things that you want to stand out. You only bullet the things that are your accomplishments. And I really do think that you need to focus very heavily on these accomplishments. I mean, you've actually already put them together when you did your brand. You've put together those specifics about yourself. So now you need to present them in a very business-oriented way. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example of how this would look on a resume. So look, I'm applying for this position at a law firm as a legal assistant. And I apologize, I keep using these examples, but again, you kind of go back to what you know. The first part about it, there's a couple keywords in there. These are the kind of things that every legal assistant should know. But remember, I'm experienced. So I want to let them know that this is what my accomplishments include. That I was experienced enough that they assigned me to multi-million-dollar real estate investment trust transactions, which you can tell was in 1993 and 1996, because now that would be multi-billion-dollar real estate investment transactions and closings. And also, I was experienced enough that before the days of faxing and scanning, partners would put my little 23-year-old butt on a plane and send me to different client locations. Okay? So instead of talking about all the things that a paralegal should do, because truthfully, if you're applying for this job, they already told you what they want. Now you're telling them how you make the difference. They say they want somebody experienced. I say that I'm experienced. Now I'm showing them. Okay. So again, here are just a couple things about those accomplishments. I'm kind of like an interior decorator. Most people think in 3s and 5s. That's kind of just the way that the human nature is. So when you're thinking about accomplishments on your resume, you should think in that odd number. Just letting you know that that's the natural way of thinking. So look at your positions. Again, start thinking about your brand and thinking about all the specifics you put down, and create 3 to 5 accomplishments per position. Then you got to start thinking about how you want to rank them. Because again, you don't want to vomit all over your resume. It has to be a 1 to 2 page document. You should be able to review them and kind of keep some aside, like use some of them in your summary and put them in your resume and keep them for your cover letter, and then hold back some for your interview. But also keep them balanced, because, even though maybe you worked at a place for 3 months and you did something high level, people are going to know you only worked there for 3 months. And if you have 11 accomplishments, it's going to seem a little disingenuous. So keep it balanced. But then, if you're starting to struggle, because I've had students come to me and say, I don't have any accomplishments. And after a lot of discussion and digging, I really realized that they do. They're just not thinking of them as accomplishments. But oftentimes there have been people who said, I don't have accomplishments, and after we've done some soul searching and digging, they don't. And I have to kind of turn it back to them and say, what does that tell you? If you're looking to move on or move up, maybe you need to start thinking about creating that pool of accomplishments and going above and beyond your job. That's a very hard conversation to have, not only with a student, but also with yourself. Okay? But here are a couple ways to start looking for those. Don't recreate the wheel. I recommend first you go back to annual reviews, because isn't it just so nice that sometimes other people tell you what your accomplishments are? Whether it's your own, self-reviews, that your own ones that you do for yourself, or the ones that your manager does for you. So look back on those annual reviews. But also something to think about, and I think a lot of people think this is selfish or weird. But keep a file. I call it my grandmother file. Like, you know how there were things that you've done in life and you don't think they're really cool, but your grandmother thinks they're just amazing, and she knows all about them, and she has all of your clippings, and when you were named at the end of the spelling bee because you came in sixth, but your grandmother knows about this. You need to keep that file because it's something to go back to. Okay? So don't recreate the wheel. But if suddenly you get to the point where you're like, I really need to do some data mining. Like I don't keep my end reviews, or oh crap, I don't have this accomplishments file. Sorry, I have two boys, so I use a lot of poop words. Start doing some data mining. And you do this based on your industry. So you think about, just again, here are some questions to ask. Did I improve management? Did I sell something bought or processed? Did you correct any inconsistent procedures? Did you extend your knowledge beyond your responsibilities? Did you rate above average on performance evaluations? One of the things that I often dig out of people is that in their performance reviews, they've done things like they've never missed a day of work. I think that is huge. Now, it may not be huge if you're coming in and you're sneezing and have the flu and you're infecting everybody, but if you have really great performance reviews consistently and you don't miss time at work, I'm telling you, these are the type of people that people want to hire. Okay? So start really thinking about these. All right, so we're kind of coming to the end here. I have one last technique that I want to talk to you guys about, and this is really one that not only kind of pulls in all of our stories and talking about this, but also I think it's a way to think about how you're spending time in your job search, and also how you're thinking about your own career path. Okay, so your mind is swimming and you're like, oh my gosh, Kelly just unloaded all these tips, and how am I going to get this all into one little story? And I am absolutely here to tell you that, guess what? You need to write more than one story. So how many stories do you need? So let's ask, how many stories do you think a person needs to write when they're starting their career path? Just throw out a couple numbers here. 27, 42, 3 to 5. Carlton, I love you. 3 to 5. I'm 10. How about we do this? 4. And that's a minimum. All right? So this chart that I'm giving you not only helps you kind of organize those stories, but like I said, it helps you think about your job search. Okay? So I want you to think of these as quadrants. So you can see where they start matching up. So the first story is your low skills and experience and your low interest. So like I said, this is I can pay my rent, and I don't have to, I'm not a college student anymore. I can eat maybe a chicken sandwich and not ramen noodles. It's probably the job that you have now, or it's the job you had before now. Okay? Kind of entry level position. Then let's move up a quadrant to that high skills, low interest. That's I can pay the rent, and maybe if I'm lucky, I can go to Traverse, or if I'm really lucky, I can go to Florida. Because I'm thinking of my pals in Michigan right now, because it feels like that's where they go. They go up or they go down. There's no east to west. But that, again, that's pretty much, you can say that that's the job that you have right now. It's that lateral move. Okay? Now you move over into that high interest, high skill position. That's the one that you want right now. Like, I want this job right now. And And that's, I want you to think about, I call this the bazooka on the gnat approach. So when you're thinking about where you want to spend your time in your job search and in crafting your story, that's where you want to put your target, is in that right now position. Okay? So when you're thinking about the different industries, and fill this chart out, fill it out. I had this chart filled out when I was looking for my job at Georgetown and when I went from Georgetown to here. My low skills, low interest was being like an event planner. Like I know I could do it. I haven't really done much of it, but people would hire me to do that. Okay. So then if I looked at my high skills, low interest position, I was essentially going back to being a paralegal. I mean, I had all the skills in the world, but I did not want to go back to that. Then I moved over into that high interest, high skills. That was training and development for me. Okay. I had a lot of interest in it and I knew that I had the skills. So I spent a majority of my time looking for those positions and really crafting my story in that quadrant. I had my other messages, I had my other stories for these, and I had other people. I mean, I had this filled out so that I knew the industries, I knew the people that I knew the types of job descriptions within those, okay? But I also spent time on the quadrant below that, which is the where I want to be when I grow up. And I really want you guys to know that you should always be thinking about what you want to be when you grow up. Okay? And you can be whatever you want to be. Just like I tell my kids. But this, going from the bottom quadrant, kind of looping around, you can see that that can be a natural career arc. And you can start thinking about how you want to move up and over and down into that where I want to be, grow up in a position. And I still have this. I mean, I know where I am right now and I know where I want to be when I grow up. And, I must admit, maybe after I get my doctorate, I'll suddenly realize that I want to move into student affairs. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm an alumni. I want to go to student affairs. So now I have to move over into that low interest, low skills. Like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go work at the registrar's office or the dean of students as an assistant. And then I have to kind of move up to that high skills, low interest. I have to move myself around these quadrants again. All right? But in your career path and when you're thinking about the tips and techniques that you're doing and the stories that you're creating, I'm here to tell you it's a minimum of 4. Right? So, with that, we've got 12 minutes. And I am going to look at a couple questions
Kelly,
here.
I've
Do you
been
guys
tracking
want
the
to feed me the
questions.
questions or do you want me to look through them?
If anybody that wrote a question, if I leave you out, please put it in there
Okay.
again. But I've been tracking what you guys are asking. So to go back to Lauren's statement, Lisa answered this, but she asked, how do you mention personality traits and such as the passion through clothing and mention it professionally, and how do you translate your personal to professional passions? Well, Lisa said essentially it's about kind of consistency. So in Lisa's example, she cares about the 50 plus age range for job seekers, and she doesn't have to say that really because people can see it in how she's spending her time. So do you have anything that you would add to that kind of response that Lisa gave?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, we all hear the story about people taking their passions and translating that into careers. I believe that that's what I've done. Is I have a passion for Michigan State, and through my passion for Michigan State, I involved myself in their alumni association, and through that association with the Alumni Association, I found my career path in higher education. So, there are certain things in your life that can absolutely translate into the professional world. You just have to sometimes rabbit hole them, follow them down the line. And again, we talked about how when you're thinking about that story that sometimes are those aha moments, and they're really beautiful. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's going to have that like, oh, moment, but when you do, when you spend the time, they really are illuminating, and that's what I would hope for every one of you on this call today.
Great, thank you. So the next one, E. White asked about how long should the document be, what type of paper to use, those kind of things. Do you have any comments on that?
Sure. If we're talking about our resumes, how long the document should be, because really that, like we've talked about, that is probably the most professional expression of a story. How long should it be? I'm going to give you my very legal answer. And remember, I spent 20 years in the legal profession. And that answer is it depends. It depends on your experience. It depends on the industry that you're applying to. For example, if you're applying in the academia world, you'd have to have a CV, and it would generally be longer because it would contain all of the projects and papers and seminars and types of things that you've done. I mean, the kind of rule is that your typical entry level 0 to 5 years out, maybe even 5 to 10 years out, try to keep it to a page. I mean, again, you've got all these things and you want to talk about them, but you don't have to put them all in there. If you put the ones that highlight your benefits and show your value, you don't need to junk it up. You don't need to have all that extra. So right now in my career, my resume is 2 pages. I don't see myself getting any larger than that until I've accomplished my next goal, which is my doctorate. And I'd have more things to add to it, and I'd have more years of experience. Paper, I would hope that you wouldn't have to use paper nowadays. But I always tell my students that whenever you go to an interview, you always have copies of your resume. You also always have copies of your references. And I'm going to give you a little tip and technique in your references. Give them a little insight into how you know these people. Okay? So if you have a list of 3 references, tell them, Rebecca Killian, currently the manager of professional development at McKenna Long. Ms. Killian was my supervisor at Hogan and Hartson for X amount of years. We also worked together at Marriott, period. Okay? Give people some context. I'm also going to give you one other tip on that is you better make darn sure that you've not only contacted your references to ask them if they can be your references, but also that you've done the courtesy of supplying them with a copy of your current resume and a copy of the job description that you're applying for. Because that allows the person giving the reference to really talk specifically about what you can do for that company. And I have to tell you, I would tell my students this, and I'll tell any person this who asks me for a reference. If you don't supply those for me, and somebody calls me and asks me, oh, can you give a I tell them no. And I can tell you that's the worst reference a person can have. So those are just a couple. I kind of bloodhounded that a little bit more than the question, but I hope that was helpful.
Good comments. So Lisa asked, so related to the quadrant you shared, are some of the over-under qualified rejections due to not matching the quadrant that's being pursued? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we all have those times where you know what you want. I mean, I want to be head of I want to be the executive vice president of Michigan State's Alumni Association. But I know right now that if I applied for that job, first of all, Scott would laugh because he's not leaving anytime soon. And second of all, I'm not qualified for it. but I know maybe, wink wink, that that's where I'd like to be somewhere down the line. So I have to start looking at that position and thinking about how I can craft my experiences to get there. There was a great quote. Actually, Scott turned me on to a guy that does the Buddhist boot camp. And it was about how the second that you let go of expectations, your life becomes so much easier. So come at your job search in a very realistic in a very realistic context, and again, honing in, using that jokingly bazooka on the gnat approach, spending your time in that high desire, high skills area, those over-unders will get smaller and smaller and smaller, and suddenly you'll tighten around the job that you really want, and you know how to go after it.
Exactly. So a lot of what you've been talking about is really luck favors the prepared, right? I mean,
absolutely.
So
luck and opportunity.
That's what a lot of this is. And so to use a quick example, like how this webinar came to be, how did it come to be? Like you weren't like, hey, I want to do a webinar. You and I bumped into each other at the homecoming football game last year. We happened to sit next to each other. I said, hey, I'm doing these things. Would you like to do it? Oh, yeah, I've got some ideas. And here you are today. And I think a lot of what happens in our career is exactly like that. I wasn't going to the football game looking for Kelly to do this presentation, but I know what I'm trying to do. I know the types of people that I like to have, do them here. Kelly knows what she wants to do. There's a reason she's doing this, right? So we just kind of collided in the right moment, and we were both prepared. So I think a lot of what you're talking about is exactly that. Know yourself, know what you want, and then start looking at what, the market is looking for.
Couldn't have said it better, Dave. Perfect.
Now,
Dave, something that I'm noticing, it's one thing I wanted to comment there. I'm noticing that a couple people are asking very specific questions about their jobs and their resumes. Is that something that you can help them out with?
Is that like a sideways plug?
Quite possibly. Isn't that something that you do, Dave?
So here's the thing. What we do here, yes, we're glad to help with that, but our general idea on this particular topic of resumes is I'm glad to give somebody an 8-second, screening because I'm generous. I give the extra 2 seconds. But I think the best person to have look at this is somebody who's done hiring in your occupation, or someone at least that's working
Absolutely.
in that company, because it comes down to having the right content, and there's no possibility that even though we know like the basic mechanics of what should be in a resume and can help kind of with the generics, it's impossible for Lisa and I to know every single occupation and every single employer. So we've written some blog posts about that specific thing, and I think we have a video somewhere on our blog actually talking about the specific topic. There's one about like why maybe a career expert isn't the right person to look at your resume. I'm not saying don't use us because we're glad to help, but we've done a lot of work to kind of tap into the whole network, the whole Spartan Nation, and there are great people out there like yourself, Kelly, that like can have some experience in the particular field that you might be looking for, and their commentary might be kind of worth more of your time to spend with that person than maybe us. The other reason why I think this is important is because ultimately it all comes down to who you know. And so it's not just what's on your resume, but it's how you're delivering that, right? So again, to go back to the luck favors the prepared, if I happen to know that Scott's leaving tomorrow and Kelly and I bump into each other, like maybe that starts lining up the stars correctly, right? It's not what we plan to do, but we both know what we want to do. And so we have put a lot of effort into trying to connect all of Spartan Nation together to help one another in this process. So absolutely, if you want to connect with us, Lisa put her email address up there. Mine is isbeld@msu.edu, and you can find me. We're also both on the website, alumni.msu.edu, and I put a link on there to what we do. So there's a lot of different things that are kind of behind the scenes that we're working on all the time to help you to create resources. So thank you for that plug, I guess. But hopefully that answers your question. And I did mention one of the blog posts in the comments, and I was about to put another one in while you were talking. There's a couple other questions that I want to get to. I want to make sure that we answer them. So Catherine asked, what order should the jobs go in? She's got a specific situation, so it looks like she's trying to shift out of one area into another, and her experience in the actual area she's moving toward is sounds like way back. So what are your suggestions for somebody that falls into that?
Well, something that I would say about that, and I know that Lisa and I have talked about this, is that when you're transitioning to a different career, something that you'd want to kind of move up or move out of order, especially if you're farther along in your career, is possibly education. So let's say you're moving from, oh my gosh, I'm going to be really extreme here. You're a teacher and now you want to be a clown. Okay, so back in the day, you were a volunteer clown for the Shriners, but throughout your time as a teacher, you still did volunteer work with them, and you still kept your clown skills up. You know, you kept your CPE, your clown professional education units up. You would move those up in your resume because, again, it's that above the fold. It shows them that, and truthfully, I did this with my own job search for William & Mary because I went from being a higher education professional to moving into alumni affairs. So the way that my resume looked was I put my summary up top, and then I put my volunteer service with the MSU Alumni Association Board next, and my recent education with Georgetown, because my master's thesis at Georgetown had to do with alumni engagement. Whereas, you know, somebody my age, it would probably start out, bam, with professional experience. But that wouldn't have caught their eye. It wouldn't have been, again, above the fold. So don't think of it in the, I need to do it the traditional way. Think of it in, what do I want people to see first?
Great. So one more question. So how and when should work samples be presented? What format should they use? A hard copy? Should it be like online? What are your ideas about that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So often when I was teaching and my students were going through the program, I would actually at the end have them create a portfolio. And I would have them send it to me two ways. It would be in a hard copy, and it would also be in an electronic copy. And what I would tell them is, whenever you go on a job search, now that's not necessarily when you're doing when you go on a job interview. It's not necessarily when you're doing the initial job search, because you only give people what they ask for. Because if they say, we want a cover letter and a resume, and you say you send a cover letter, a resume, your references, and your portfolio, they don't want to have anything to do with you. Again, it's a roadmap. They're telling you what they want. But when you go into that job interview, you absolutely have that body of work with you. And it's, you know, it's not in a $100 binder, but it's in a nice binder with some tabs, and you say, you know, I put this portfolio together and my resume and my references are in here. I'm just going to leave this here for you. I mean, what's the worst they can say? No. Sorry about that. So, but also you have it in a electronic version, because as a follow-up, you send it to after the interview. I know I left a copy of my portfolio with you. I'm just sharing it with you now electronically in case you wanted to send it to, you know, anybody else in your organization. to learn more about me. So those are just kind of some role playing there.
Great. So I think we're over our time for today. We've been a lot of comments on the chat, so there's some chat going on there. We're going to leave this open for just a little bit. I want to let all of you listening to know how much we appreciate you. It's great to come together, even if it's just virtual like this. Spartan Nation can do really powerful things when we all come together. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for your comments and for the chat that's going on. We're going to leave the chat room open for just probably about 10 minutes. We do this every first and third Thursday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. So there's a different topic going on. You can always find them at alumni.msu.edu/professional series. So we always try to put up maybe a month in advance so you can see what's coming up. And with that, I am going to sign off and say go green. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Lisa corrected me. It's the second and fourth Thursday. I always say the first and third. Thank you for correcting me, Lisa. So the second and fourth Thursday every month we do these. So thank you very much for being here. Go green. And we look forward to talking with you again soon. We'll leave the chat open. So any last comments, Kelly?
I just want, again, I want to thank everybody. I know that everybody are busy professionals, and I really appreciate that you spent time with me today. And again, go green. And I love that people are typing go white.